Hey there, are you grieving the potential loss of a loved one or feeling overwhelmed with the loss of someone you care about? If so, you're in the right place. Lisa Hartung here, and this podcast is designed to guide you through topics surrounding death and dying. We'll dive into multifaceted aspects of grief, offering you a blend of personal stories, expert insights, and practical advice for your grief journey. May this be a safe space for you to learn, listen, and ask questions about your own life and loved ones. So grab your favorite beverage and let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Giving Grief Grace. I hope that you are all staying cool. If you are here in the US East Coast where it's been super hot over the past couple weeks, hopefully that heat bubble has burst. And I hope that everyone had a lovely 250th 4th of July celebration. I am super excited. I had some time with my family over the holiday weekend and was really able to just be present, enjoy us being together and enjoying the kids in their little excitement as little kids. And so part of being present was I did some painting. I had gotten a little on plein air watercolor set and was super excited to be able to be mobile with it and just have some time to paint. It's something I don't ever do when it's just busy and we're going and going here, going there with the kids. And so super fun to have this little time to celebrate art. And as you know, I've been going through the Artist's Way with a group of women, and we are coming up at the end of our 12-week session together. And just thinking about how can we connect and continue this journey. And so I wanted to open this up to listeners who are interested in coming together on the third Thursday of every month. And I am offering a night of art. So it's a 1-hour session where we get together. You come as you are. There'll be fun dancing and you can do video off. Don't worry about that. But it's just a fun time for us to come together and to play. We do not play enough. And especially as we are grieving or caregiving and feeling like every last drop has been sucked from our cup, this is time for you to fill your cup again. This is time for you to come and let your hair down. This is time for you to feel like a human and to carve out time just for you to be able to enjoy and be present. So come and join me the third Thursday of this month. We will meet on July 16th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And for all of my caregivers out there, that's after bedtime, hopefully. Caregivers on the East Coast, and then on the West Coast, you're just getting home from work. Just come and enjoy. And this is a free event. Go to lisahartung.com, lisahartung.com, and you can sign up to come to this fun art night on July 16th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time and just enjoy. We'll have fun with it. It helps us move through our grief in a different way and bringing more joy to that. So can't wait to see you there. I look forward to connecting with you. And if you can't make this month, then we will be back again next month. So this week, I'm super excited to have Carolyn Shelby with us. She's the creator of Grief Clarity Labs, and it's a company that she founded after caring for her mom with Alzheimer's for over a decade. Carolyn has so much wisdom to share with us, and I think when you're going through such a trying time, you don't know all of the answers. And so Carolyn is here to share her experience and then to also share how she helps clients move through their grief and how they process loss with more compassion. And she's just such a light in this world. And I think that we have a lot to learn from her. And she also has a new book out called Living Beside the Leaving. And it's all about how to grieve someone when they're still here. And what does that anticipatory grief look like? And how can you move through it? So I am so grateful for Carolyn for coming onto the show. And without further ado, welcome, Carolyn Shelby. Welcome back to another episode of Giving Grief Grace. We are so grateful that you are here today, and I'm super excited to introduce Carolyn Shelby of Grief Clarity Labs as our special guest for the day. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Carolyn. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me. I am certainly excited to be here we've already had a little bit of a fun conversation. So I can't wait to see what happens.
Oh my goodness, Carolyn. And I'm so grateful for you and the work that you're doing in the world. My heart goes out to you with the loss of your mom and a dear friend. And you've really taken your pain and experience and turned it into purpose. And so I would love for you just briefly to share with listeners a little bit about what Grief Clarity Labs is, and then we can dive into your story.
So I am a certified grief coach and grief educator and author. And I provide both support groups, one-on-one coaching, and in 2027, I'll be doing grief retreats as well. And it came to about after caring for my mom with Alzheimer's for over a decade and losing her, and also losing my godmother, the family dog, and a
Oh
dear
my
friend from
gosh.
college, all in that same year. I went actually and got my certification really more to just help me process my own grief and to kind of talk to myself, and then just felt a calling. I ended up going on a women's retreat and feeling how healing travel can actually be. And I have been working with my own grief coach and just kind of realized the need out there, especially for those experiencing anticipatory grief, because
Yes.
a lot of these services I would have loved to have had when I was going through the caregiving process
Mhm.
with my mom. And also my mom was a helper. She was a giver. And so it's kind of my way of honoring her. Her name was Linda. My friend's name was Clay, who also suffered greatly from losing his mom. And I incorporated those initials, the C and L, into my name, Grief Clarity Labs.
Yeah. There's so many ways to connect with you, and I'm excited about your retreats coming up and your new book that's out. So definitely want to chat more about that. And I think, gosh, caregiving is it's such a gift to be able to connect with our loved ones in a really intimate way, but it's also really taxing. And thank you for doing that for over 10 years with your mom. And Alzheimer's is it's hard because you are mourning the loss as you are living it. And I would love for you to kind of share, Carolyn, was there a moment or a time that you remember that the grief started to kick in? Because when you're caregiving, right, it's hard to see the forest but for the trees. And so you're focused on, we're going to help today, right now. And you're not necessarily thinking 5 or 10 years down the road at that point. And so, was there ever a time when you were thinking, okay, I'm in this for the long haul?
So I was lucky enough. I just do want to say I was lucky enough that I have two younger sisters. So I was not doing it alone either. So I
Mm.
did have some people to share the load and share some of the hats with, which was great because we all had our own little corners that we managed. I was the closest. So I did a lot of the in person. Somebody else was very organized and did all the paperwork and the management and whatnot, and somebody else did the logistics. So it wasn't all on one person. But honestly, it was not until after my mom passed that I really recognized any of what I was experiencing as grief per se. I don't think I knew what it was. It was just, I knew I was losing her and I knew I wasn't enjoying the experience. The first time I would say, okay, this is it, and I'm stuck in this would be honestly, we were cooking dinner one night and I was packing up leftovers. I was wearing a t-shirt from my alma mater, Goucher College. And she looked at me and said, "Oh, my daughter goes to Goucher. My daughter Carolyn goes to Goucher. Do you know her?"
Hmm.
And it was everything I could do to not just drop the plates, right then and there. It was, that's me, mom. I kind of tried to say, "Hey, I'm Carolyn." And she said to me, "Oh, Carolyn's studying photography." And I brushed it off and said, "Well, they have a very good program," and went back to what we were doing. But that was, I think, the one moment I knew that I was losing her,
Hmm.
and it was going to be a long road.
It's hard when you know your mom as what she's always been, and then that transition to then being the caregiver. How did you navigate that? Because with Alzheimer's, it can be a kind of a slow burn over time, and
And it was very, very hard. And I probably did not navigate it the way I would tell others to navigate it now.
mm,
But we always say, right, hindsight is 2020. I have the
always.
ability of looking back through a very different lens. And so when we're in it, we kind of have to learn how to give ourselves that grace, and that we're doing we're doing the best we can with the information we have in that
Yeah.
moment. It might not always be all of the information, but it's what we have in that moment, and we're making the best decisions we can in that moment. I resorted to anger and frustration a lot.
Mm,
And I'm sorry to admit that. And I I often tried to pull her back into reality, and I would argue with her. Like, I can remember her asking me why I was calling her mom, and she didn't have a daughter. So why was I calling her mom? And so instead of, accepting that and moving with it and just re-entering her version of the world, I went and I got my baby photo album, and we sat down on the couch, and I tried showing her all the pictures, right, of us together, her bringing me home from the hospital, and all those memories. And she got very, very quiet and didn't really say anything. And I finished cleaning and whatnot and doing what I was doing and went home. And about an hour or two later, I get a phone call from my father. They had divorced and were living separately, but she had called him, accusing him of forcing her to bring home this baby and raise this baby that wasn't hers.
oh.
So it's trying to bring her back into my world often created more frustration, more anger, and more pain for everybody else as well as her, rather than just now I would tell myself to look back at it and say, "Look, you had a great day. You made dinner together, you laughed together, you talked together, you're in her home, she's trusting you. Does
Hmm.
that label really matter? Or is it enough to be someone that she loves and someone that she trusts and someone that she's enjoying spending time with?" And
Hmm.
just take that with you and move from there. And then I always recommend my clients have somebody to vent to, right? Usually a safe person, totally removed from the situation. Because the
Hmm.
downside of caregiving is with family, everybody is involved, right?
Hmm.
They all might have different roles and be involved at different levels, but they all have their own interpretation and they all have their own grief. So it's important to find someone who is removed from the situation and you can just vent to safely. Or I'm a
Mm,
talker, so I prefer that route.
yeah.
Many prefer just writing it down,
Mm,
and you can get your anger out that way, because it is important to get the anger out and those
yeah.
feelings out. And
Yeah.
though I don't want to invalidate those feelings in any way, because they are very valid, but I think the importance is to separate the two.
Hmm. And by recognizing, I like what you said. Is it enough to spend the day with her and enjoy and laugh and be together, right? And making memories without having to correct her.
Right. And for me, it was what hurt was not being her daughter. And
Yeah.
like, did that matter? She
Mm,
trusted me. She knew I was someone she loved. She
mm.
knew I was someone she could trust, which really, in the end, that's what a daughter is, right? Does the label really matter?
Yeah. And that's hard as a daughter to think, what am I to mom now? But
Right.
again, going back to we're enjoying the time together. Was it a progression where, at first it was she was functioning on her own and then things changed? And was
Yeah.
that
Oh,
a
of
rapid
course. And
change or
it's
was it a kind
Yes,
of
of course.
slow?
It's Alzheimer's is like most Alzheimer's is one type of dementia.
Right.
Um, and it's generally a very slow kind of progression.
Mm,
I would say looking back, we can now say that she was probably suffering from the early signs even before she got divorced in 2012 and my father moved out in 2012. She passed in 2024. She was someone who loved to travel and didn't
mm.
want to go anywhere.
Ah.
There were personality changes. She was an avid quilter and knitter, was having trouble following directions and patterns.
Mm,
She would repeatedly forget passwords. We would have to change her email or random passwords probably once a month.
mm.
She would lose keys, things like that. And these are all things that you kind of chalk up to getting older, right?
Right?
And
It's
she
like,
was on
oh, yeah.
medication, or, these are all things us women, we go through changes, right?
Yeah.
And then those changes affect your brain too. So,
Yeah.
these are all things that you kind of were very easily written
Like,
off
yeah.
as just part of life
Hmm.
until they kind of got to a point where it was obvious that we couldn't write that off anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how was that navigating that? Because that's a challenge that a lot of listeners have is at what point do you seek care? Or do you suggest to your parent that it's time to seek support or a different type of support?
So my experience was very, very different just because until the day she died, my mother never accepted outwardly her diagnosis. It had run in her family. She had lost her favorite person to Alzheimer's.
Mm,
It was something she feared her whole life.
mm,
And so even bringing up the suggestion that there might be something going on and we should make an appointment with a doctor or explore options or whatnot would create a temper tantrum, screaming and yelling and whatnot. She refused to accept any of it. So we actually had to do a lot of it creatively and behind her back.
yeah, I mean,
but
it's hard.
we had a whole calendar in Google we called the mom calendar, and everybody had different days of showing up or calling
Hmm.
and different
Hmm.
time, like different appointment meeting times of calling and checking in. And if we weren't able to reach some point usually either me or my father who were close, usually me, would get called to show up and to go and just randomly pop by and check on her,
Yeah.
bring groceries, have to do laundry, something like that, just to randomly check in and make sure everything was okay.
Mm. I think about it. My mom was Christian Science, so growing up, it was always mind over matter. So when she got sick, she was like your mom and like, ah, I'm not sick. I'm fine. I'm just going through chemo, which was a hard thing. And it was like a decision of do you do chemo or not? But thinking about that with your mom, I am amazed that You must have had to do backflips to try to, bring her to appointments and talk. I mean, that's a whole nother, it's like a
It
whole
was,
nother
well,
realm, right?
we sadly didn't do appointments for a period of years just because we couldn't.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
if it was she was
but because we
combative, that
couldn't
makes
get her
sense.
to go.
Yeah.
And my sister was actually someone who was very good at that because she, like my mom, was very stubborn and hard-headed.
Ah,
When she was a child, one of the teachers in a conference said, she's always telling the other kids what to do, but they seem to like it. So I don't know what to do. And that actually came in very handy
very handy.
because my she was my mom's favorite, although I know no parent ever has favorites, but she was my mom's favorite. And my mom would listen to most anything she said. So if Christina said, "We have a doctor's appointment today," my mom would say, "Okay." And she would go to the doctor's appointment with Christina. Now,
Uh-huh.
if you just didn't bring up the fact that we were talking about Alzheimer's or anything like that. And that's how we got her to the actual diagnosis appointment later than we should have. Yeah, Christina took her, and my father was there, and I stayed home. But yeah, she never accepted it.
And so when you were at the doctor, would you just have the doctor tell you, like outside of the room, what the final diagnosis was so that your mom
So
wasn't aware?
I
Or,
can't actually speak to that much because
yeah,
I usually wasn't there.
yeah,
And
Christina
for
was
the
there.
final diagnosis, I was not there. What I
Mm.
can do is speak to the process of getting her the tuberculosis shot to move into memory care.
Oh,
This was process because there was actually paperwork I had to fill out, and I actually wrote on the paperwork that everybody in the office should be told that in no way, shape, or form can you mention Alzheimer's or that this is for memory care. Because my mother had made us promise that we would never put her in a place the way she said it.
ah,
And she had us make that promise at a very, very young age. So making that move was very, very difficult, but it
okay.
was
Necessary.
what needed to happen.
Yeah.
And so I actually wrote it out when I checked in. I just said, please see my notes on the paperwork. And they played along, thankfully. And we had told her that it was just a required thing for Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through that process, but it was a charade.
Wow. But, you have to get creative because she needed to be in memory care. And how long was she in memory care for before she
So
passed?
we actually had gotten her a spot in assisted living, but should have put her in her memory care so she would
Mm.
do what they call day visit and spend her days in memory care, and then someone would sit with her in assisted living at night. And we moved her in. It was July 1st of 2019 that we moved her in,
Mm.
and
Mm.
she passed in November of 2024. So that's 5 years.
5 years. Yeah. Wow.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah. And as the daughter, how was it for you seeing your mom's health decline, knowing what used to be, and then living with I'm thinking of holidays, and how was that for you, and how did you?
So that was actually very, very hard because my mom was very much the matriarch of the family. She was
She's the fun maker.
yes, she was the fun, the personality.
Mm,
She also was probably the smartest person I have ever known.
mm,
She was a very, very intelligent woman and a very, very strong woman. People knew when she was in a room, and she started to kind of wallflower and started to shrink. And that was very, very hard. And
yeah.
my sister started taking over that role of kind of the matriarch of the family almost. And my sister would do all the cooking and all the and whatnot, and making sure mom was dressed appropriately to go places and things like that. And that was not easy. But again, it was also one of those things where you couldn't show that to her. You had to wear those two hats.
Yeah, and it's like a go-between. And then, just for yourself processing it of spending time with your mom, as you said, making dinner and having her not remember that you were her daughter. How did you move through that after you left her house that day, or assisted living, and
So
went back home?
I would, my car
It's a
should,
safe haven.
it's amazing my car wasn't flooded by all the tears that were
Yes.
cried in my car.
Yes.
But I would find myself very often driving home and sitting in my car for, I don't know, an hour,
Mm,
just in silence and kind
mm,
of processing
yeah.
what had just happened before I could even think about getting out and going inside. And it's funny because I mean, I live alone, so it's not like there were people in my apartment, but it was just, I didn't have the energy or the capacity I had to shift gears slowly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because you're almost living in a moment of time when you're caregiving. And then coming out of that is there's life happening outside of this sphere, and it's code shifting is difficult. It's a
This
real
and
challenge.
then there's still stuff that needed to happen at home. There were still dishes that needed to be washed,
Yeah.
floors that needed to be cleaned. I still also had to run my own household, even
Yeah.
though I was a household of one. You don't want to live in squalor or come home to
Mm-hmm.
squalor, right? That's not uplifting. It was often just kind of having to flip that switch and then to do it again. And I think that's what a lot of people don't really realize about caregiving is the difficulty of that shape shifting. And
Yeah.
also, people see it as, taking care of feeding them, making sure they're safe, whatnot, while you're there. And then you get to go home and turn that off. But I think caregiving is also something that is 24/7, whether you live with the person
Mm-hmm.
or not. I would go out with friends and whatnot, and still in my head, I'm replaying conversations, running through checklists of, did I make sure she had enough, dinners for the next 3 days? Did I
Mm-hmm.
actually cover the plates? Did I write the note? Because we used to leave her notes that they were for her. Did I actually do that? Did I do this? Did I do that? How could I have said that differently? Why was she upset by that? And the brain just never turns off.
Mm-mm. Yeah. And that is the mental burden of caregiving. It's a daily experience. Was there a coping mechanism that you had or that was helpful? I love that you were, yes, your car is your sanctuary and you were able to feel free. They always say if you have to have a difficult conversation, have it in the car, right? Because you're both facing forward. Um, but was there anything else that you would do? I remember being in the throes of caregiving and just feeling like, I don't know if I'm ever going to feel joy again.
Yeah. And it was also, what I tended to do, which is something I don't encourage, is I isolated.
Hmm.
I isolated a lot and went in.
Yeah.
And, you know, any person experiencing grief, anticipatory grief, grief of loss, any type of disability, any type of grief, our least favorite question is, how are you? Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because you don't know. Quite often, you have no clue how you can even possibly answer that question. Right?
Hmm.
Is just so there's the default of I'm fine.
Yeah, which
And
another one
so
of my podcast guests would say, fine is feelings inside not expressed.
I listened to that episode. I did. And
Yeah.
yes, and that resonated. And actually, I wrote that down. I did now. I had forgotten it, but you're reminding me. And
Yes.
I wrote that one down because that is good. Um, and, so that's the default answer. And so then people assume that you are fine, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so you're not getting any type of, so I think the
Yeah.
best coping mechanism is I'm going to go back is just sharing and
Mm-hmm.
talking about it and
Talk
giving it
about it.
space
Yeah.
and giving your experience a name and not being afraid of those feelings. I mean, there were
Mhm.
a lot of feelings like I remember sitting in my car and wishing she would just die,
Mm. Yeah.
which I'm sure a lot of listeners just like gulped because, that's not something you should wish.
Yeah.
But I wanted her suffering to stop.
Yeah.
I wanted my suffering to stop. I
Mhm.
just wanted it to all be over.
Mm.
And I had thought it would be so much easier when it was over. Little did I know, but
Yeah.
little did
Yeah.
I know. But, and then I would feel so guilty for those feelings because it's like, what kind of daughter wishes her mother dead? Like,
You
that's
don't want to
just,
see her suffering, though. That's the hardest part,
yeah.
right?
And that was the thing. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of guilt, things like that. And those are the things I didn't share. And
Mm.
I wish I
Yeah, because
and
those are
it's about,
normal feelings.
finding the right people, ignoring anything that starts with at least. I hate sentences that start with at least.
Like at least
At
at
least she's
least he's
still
on
here.
this long.
At
Yeah.
least she's still around. At
Right?
least, at least
Yeah.
you can still talk to her. At least you
Mm.
can, and no,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what
I,
would have been more helpful for someone who is maybe a friend of someone who is caregiving for someone with Alzheimer's?
is, and I say this in any type of grief, there are two extremely helpful things people can do. One is just come, sit, and say, I am here.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it? Talk about it. You don't want to talk about it? Don't talk about it. You
Mm-hmm.
want to sit here in silence and stare at each other? I can sit here in silence and stare at you. It's okay. I'm here for whatever you need. That's one. Number two is tell me about her before.
Yeah.
What was she like? What were your favorite memories? What do you
Yeah.
miss the most? Because often going back to those happy things and going back to those memories, we also rewire the nervous system, and you get out of that stuck up feeling of this is never ending, this is terrible, you know
Mhm.
this is my life now, and the deep dark hole, and you start seeing some sunshine. It's like when clouds part and the sun comes out, and you're
Yeah.
like, you can feel your body lighten, and it's nothing that you do, but you can feel it happen. And it's the same type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that being able to share stories of your happy memories together is reinvigorating because it is stressful in the here and now. And when you feel like there's no end in sight and it's hard on both sides, to remember, oh my goodness, we've had such a good time together.
Exactly.
Right.
And I went while my mom was still in those beginning stages. My favorite thing, and starting to kind of go to some of those dark places and whatnot. My favorite thing to do would be to ask her about her favorite memories, ask her
Uh,
about herself, and sometimes it was real stuff, and sometimes it was total garbage, but she was able to talk about things, and she was
mm,
able to, and that usually would reset a kind of spiral sundown or a sundowning episode or an episode that was going in a direction that was not helpful. Uh,
So redirecting.
Kind of, yeah, like redirecting her. And
Yeah.
also now I heard things and have stories and have experiences that I probably would not have had otherwise. One of the good things that came out of taking care of my mom is we got so much closer. We did not have a great relationship all of the time. We're very, very similar people.
Mm.
And so when we butted heads.
You really,
Uh,
yeah.
but I think that's a common experience with mothers and daughters, right?
Hmm.
And so but I was able to kind of see her through a very different lens and who she was and what informed some of her experiences and some of her behaviors as a child that I did not really appreciate. And I was able to forgive her for a lot of things. And I
Mm.
was then able to create a much better relationship with her, and I can live on now with much better feelings and memories of her. So I am thankful for that experience.
Yeah. By being curious, you then
Yeah.
deepened your relationship and got more of an understanding of why she did the things or said and things that she did
My grief
earlier.
coach, Tony Filippone, my mentor, always says, don't attend the funeral early. And I think that sums it up so
Mm.
well, because you don't want to walk away and say, oh, she's dying, this is and live in that world, because you're missing out on so many opportunities, like the experience of me being there for my mom meeting my nephew at 8 months old. And
Oh.
the visit did not start on a great tone, but we reset. We let her have her lunch alone, went back, allowed her to come into the room with us. And it was like someone had flipped a switch, and they had some really great interactions that I now have photographs of. My nephew will never remember it. He was only 8 months old, but we do
Mhm.
have the photographs, and his mom and I do remember it. And then later that day, we were listening to some music. And this was actually the last time I saw her awake. And it just struck me to ask her, hey, did you play this piece, Mom? Because she was a musician.
Ah.
And she looked at me as though we were sitting at the dining room table when I was 15 years old, and just her blue eyes. And she looked at me and thought and said, parts of it. And that was it. That was all. That was all I got. But that memory I have gone back to so many times, and that carried me through my darkest days of grief, because
Mm.
I could think back to that experience, and what a beautiful experience that was.
Hmm.
So and I could have walked away and just sunken down on how terrible it was and not even have asked that question, and then never have had that experience. So by
Hmm.
being curious and by being open to whatever is going to happen,
Yeah.
I was rewarded.
Wow. And when you hear that song, I'm sure you think about her in that moment.
Yeah, it's a classical piece, so don't hear it a lot. But
Not just play it on the radio.
I wouldn't recognize it if I did. But I do not have the music ear. That skipped me. But when I hear the composer's name, Bartok, I do.
Oh, what instrument did she play?
She was a pianist and a singer.
Oh, I love that. As the woman of the family, the matriarch, was she the one who pulled everyone together during the holidays to sing and
Definitely,
do
yes. That was always, even just not the holidays. Music was
her
woven
love language?
through everything we did, always classical. She was not a pop or anything fan.
Hmm.
Uh, that was my father. But she loved her classical music and
Oh,
would sing along with it, and Christmas carols. I still can hear her and see her trimming the tree and singing the Christmas carols with the music, with the record that was playing.
That's just so special, right? To know that her legacy lives on and through music and your memories
Although
of
they say music is does that to a lot of dementia patients, but music was
uh,
her, yeah,
is a
that was
helpful.
her thing.
Yeah. I've often wondered, and I haven't looked into this, but I find that people who were musicians or have music as part of their lives seem to live longer. But I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know. My mom was 72, so
Okay, she's a little young to go.
but the woman I call my grandmother will be 97 this year. So, and she was
Yeah.
also that's they met she met my mom through music. So,
Ah, yeah, 97. That's incredible. Yeah. Oh my goodness. And I think music just is a bond that you can share. And it's so helpful, especially at the end of life, to have music and have, whatever their favorite songs were playing. It's very soothing.
well, yeah, that's what we did, and that's what we did when we got the call that it was time.
Mm.
And it took about 3 days, and we had Vivaldi's Four Seasons playing, and the firework music playing
Mhm.
almost constantly.
Yeah, and it's such a heartwarming time to be able to connect over the music, but very hard as well. But Carolyn, you've just written a book. I think that there is so much wisdom from someone who has walked a path of caregiving to share. And maybe you could share with us a favorite memory that you write about in the book, and then let us know how we can find it and how we can find you.
Certainly. Well, the book is called Living Beside the Leaving, and the meeting my nephew story is actually in the book too. Um,
Mm.
but that's definitely one. And the other is she had had a fall and had hurt her eyes, and we had to go into the city and go to doctor's appointments and deal with the traffic and the of going into New York City and just wandering and finding parking. And it had been a long day for her, a very long day for her. And we had brought her back. She had had her dinner, and we were saying goodbye. And I bent over and I kissed her on the top of the forehead. And I said, you did good today, which was a mom saying. She would always say, you did good. Did I do good? Was a constant kind of question. And so I said, you did good today, mom. I love you. And she looked up at me, and she hadn't spoken in probably about 3 years. And she looked at me and she said, I love you,
Oh,
and went back to eating.
oh,
And my sister had been in her room, and I went running to my sister just because that was just that and the other meeting Owen was our two memories I hold
mm,
so dear because um, I knew she was still in there.
yeah. And for her, oh, to say that and know, she hasn't spoken in 3 years and
Yeah,
to let
yeah.
you know that she loves you. Like,
But that was powerful. But the book can be found on Amazon.
mm,
Again, it's called Living Beside the Leaving,
yeah.
a daughter's story of caregiving, Alzheimer's, and loss.
Mm,
It's by Carolyn Shelby.
yeah. Before we close out, is there any last piece of advice you might have for someone who is thick in it right now, on how they can either prepare or something that they can let go of? Because sometimes it's just, you don't know what to do.
I actually don't, I think preparing If you're talking about preparing for the loss, I assume
Mm-hmm.
there is no preparing for the loss.
Yeah.
And trying to prepare for the loss, I think, is a mistake.
Mm.
Simply because you can't pre-game grief, right? The body and the brain cannot process things that have not happened yet.
Mm.
So, as hard as you try to get ready, you're not going to be ready.
Yeah.
So, I think the best thing to do is to stop trying. And I know that sounds counterintuitive and it sounds really hard. And everything I have said today is a lot easier said than done. Some of it, I still have trouble with. But the best thing to do is, like I said before, is to be present, is to
Mm.
get curious and just, I have the sign up there. This is a positive thinking area. Try to find the positive meaning in experiences.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And being present. I love that. You can plan ahead to an extent, but it's really tough, and you can do your planning after they've passed.
Yes, because I thought I was preparing myself. I did,
Mm.
and I was not prepared. And there were things I grieved the lack of a caregiving role, which during it, I would never have said I would miss that aspect of my life.
Yeah.
But now suddenly I had all of this time on my hands and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to do with it. And there is also something about being needed
Mm-hmm.
and somebody relying on me. I
Yeah.
don't have kids, I don't have a family. And I know a lot of people out there do caregiving with kids, and my hats go off of them because I couldn't even imagine. But um, I had to also grieve being needed in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's something that you wouldn't think about. As you said, you were in it. It was frustrating and challenging and difficult. And then all of a sudden, when it's not there, it's a huge life change.
It is. I kept looking at my phone, waiting for it to ring. And I used to dread those phone calls and
Mm.
sigh and roll my eyes every time the phone rang and want to
Yeah.
throw it at the wall. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
then there would be days where the phone didn't ring at all and I would miss it, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a very, Tony, I steal a lot of her sayings, but she always says, you can't pre-game grief.
Hmm. It
You
comes
can't
when it
pre-game
wants to.
grief. You can't. It's not something you can prepare for.
Mm-hmm.
So you just got to kind of go through it, and it's not something you can rush, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's going to happen, and it's going to take time, and there are going to be good days, and there are going to be bad days, and bad days are going to follow good days, and you're not going backwards. You're not regressing. It's all just part of the experience.
Yeah. After your mom's passing, how had your grief processing changed from the caregiving anticipatory grief to then she's passed, and what does my life look like now?
So I actually didn't know anything about grief processing or grief or anticipatory grief until after my mother died. I did not process the anticipatory grief,
Mm.
uh, which probably made it that much harder
Mm-hmm.
processing the actual loss. So that's how it changed. I mean, I didn't know grief education, grief coaching, or anything that I'm doing now was a thing
Yeah.
until I was scrolling TikTok one day and found my mentor. Thought she was crazy. Asked myself who the heck this person thought she was, because she was, talking about reframing and
Mm.
dancing and joy during grief and all of these things that just sounded so foreign to me. And this was 3 weeks after I lost my mother. So I was not ready to hear it by any stretch of
Mhm.
the imagination.
Yeah.
Um, but they seeded into the back of my mind. And I kept watching her videos and I kept coming back to them.
Mm,
And I kept watching her lives and going to her support groups and taking those tiny steps. I think so often we think we're not moving and everything is terrible and nothing has happened. But when we talk about it and someone is able to look at it with a wider lens, they say, but what about that step you took? And that step
yeah.
you took? And that one? And that one? And you're suddenly like, oh, well, maybe I'm not doing quite so badly. And that's kind of what the grief certification program took.
Yeah.
So I would recommend don't wait for the loss to hire to get help with your
Yes.
grief is definitely what I would recommend, whether it's me, whether it's someone else, it doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
find someone, do the research, follow the podcasts, read the books, just because, yeah, it does make life a lot easier.
Mm, that's so true. There is a community to help you, and there is someone that it's not the same path, but maybe has walked a similar path that can help you, or can at least just say, hey, I've also had a loss. Let's talk about it.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And I would say the first 6 months of me seeing a grief coach, we weren't really doing grief education, right? I
Yeah,
was just, I
just
was telling
trying to
her
survive.
what was going on right now. And she was asking me questions to kind of help me reframe it, just
Mm,
because you're not ready. You're not ready.
yeah,
Early grief is the first 2 years,
yeah.
roundabout, right? There's no timeline, but they categorize 2 years as early grief.
But it's just that not feeling like you have to get everything done. Or we talk a lot about you don't just get over, like quote unquote, get over grief.
Right.
This is a healing process and a transformational process that lasts a lifetime. And wherever
Exactly.
you are on that part of the journey is right where you need to be.
I don't know if you've ever heard the bell in a box metaphor.
Mm, share it.
That's one metaphor. I use one that's slightly different, but there's a metaphor about grief being a bell in a box.
Hmm.
And when grief first happens, the box is very, very small.
Yeah.
And there's a ball bouncing in the box, right? And so the
Mm,
ball is going to constantly hit that bell. So you're going to constantly feel it. As we reframe and as we expand life, and as time goes on and we do the grief work, the box gets bigger.
aha.
So now there's more room for that ball to bounce around without hitting the bell. There are going to be times that the ball hits the bell.
Mm,
There are going to be time it glances it hits it straight on, whatnot, but it's not going to be as often and it's not going to feel quite as harsh as when the box was
so
two by
small.
two and
Mm.
the ball was hitting the bell every 5 minutes, right?
I love that imagery. We've talked about stone in a jar and how the jar gets bigger, and so the stone
Same
doesn't.
idea, same idea.
Yeah, but I love the
I
bell
also
in the
talk
box.
about, I relate it back to being like an injury, right? If
Yeah.
you've ever broken a bone, had a
Mhm.
surgery, when it first happens, it hurts a lot. And your
Mm,
world is revolving around it. What you can do, how you sleep, whether you can work, you scheduled your whole life around this injury. Then, as time goes on, and not just time, but as you do the work, as you go to physical therapy and you try it and you process it, and life goes on, it begins to heal. But many things, there's often a scar, there may be a
yeah.
limp, there may be anything, there may be evidence that, and there may be pain on a rainy day,
Mm,
so you'll
mhm.
feel it. Life does, you go, there's a day where you go 2 hours and you're laughing and you're realizing you didn't think about the cast on your ankle, right?
Yeah, and it's how do you bring in more joy? You talked even at the beginning of our conversation of helping others and being of service and how cathartic that can be as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
And just that's one reason why I do this is because
yeah.
yes, I'm helping others and I'm helping others process their grief. And, I'm getting a word out there. Society is so ignorant about grief.
Oh my
It
gosh,
really
we need
is.
to
And
talk
it's
more about
mind
it. We could
blowing.
talk all day, every day about grief. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for coming on the show today. People can find you at griefclaritylabs.com. I'll put it in the show notes. They can find your book on living beside the leaving. And if they want to work with you, I will also include that link in the show notes as well.
So I also, not to interrupt you,
Mhm.
but I am also offering to anybody listening today a free 30-minute call. So you can go to www.griefclaritylabs, plural.com/call and schedule that. And
Mm.
you will get at least one takeaway to help process movement in your grief, and we can talk about where you are and what would be helpful to you. No promotions, no nothing, just two people having a 30-minute conversation without judgment.
Mm, what a gift. Thank you so much, Carolyn. I really appreciate it, and I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing and helping others with.
Well, thank you for having me. And I know you're doing this too. So, and what you're doing is great too, and giving a voice to all the different minds out there in grief, because there's a lot of different experiences and minds. So, you're
Yeah.
doing great things too.
Oh, thank you. I hope that you have a great week ahead, and I hope that our listener does as well. And thank you so much, giving everyone grace, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Giving Grief Grace. It would be such a gift if you could share this episode with someone and brighten their day. You never know what will happen. Subscribe to get a weekly dose of positivity, and while you're at it, please leave a review. May you be kind to yourself in the week ahead and give yourself grace. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.